They broke the Orc resistance. The last wall had won. The planet was, by Imperial definition, liberated. But there was no victory parade. Koorland stood not on the bridge of his flagship, but on the fire-ravaged surface of the world his forces had just reclaimed. He walked through the ruins of a great plaza, the ground littered with the bodies of his Astartes brethren. He knelt, examining the corpse of a fallen orc, noting the quality of its war gear with a strategist's cold eye. He spoke quietly with an apothecary whose Nathathium was stained red, the report of gene seed recovery rates unacceptably low. He stood with the ultramarine tetrarch, watching the smoke rise from the ruined manufactorums. "We have taken the field, tetrarch," Koorland said, his voice flat and devoid of triumph. "A victory for the annals." The ultramarine agreed, his own voice heavy. "Look at the cost," Koorland continued, gesturing to the devastation. "We have lost nearly a quarter of our number. Good men, veterans of 100 campaigns, and for what? This ruin. We cannot do this 50 more times. We cannot even do it 5 more times." He looked at his fellow commander, his eyes filled with a cold, hard certainty. "This victory is the first page in the book of our extinction. A war of attrition against this foe is a war we have already lost." Attrition. Chapter 5. The Voice from the Flames. Narrator. The news of the victory at Adamanta reached Terra not as a triumph, but as a butcher's bill written in the blood of demigods. Koorland returned to the throne world a changed man. He had left as a messenger of a truth they refused to hear. He returned as the commander of the Imperium's only effective military force, his authority forged in the fires of a battle the High Lords could not even comprehend. He was no longer a petitioner. He was a power unto himself, and the council that had censured him now greeted him with a new, unfamiliar emotion: fear. The gilded cage had become a trap, and they knew, with the cold certainty of the condemned, that Koorland and his unsanctioned army were the only things standing between them and the executioner's axe. In a secret conclave held in a shielded data vault deep beneath the foundations of the Imperial Palace, the true desperation of the Imperium was laid bare. The arrogant bluster was gone. Lord Commander Udo was a deflated shadow of his former self, his eyes wide with terror, not at the Xenos, but at the grim-faced Astartes commander who now held all the real power. The ecclesiarch was silent, struggling to frame the loss of so many of the Emperor's angels as a glorious sacrifice when it so clearly stank of defeat. It was Inquisitor Veritas who now held the floor, her cultivated paranoia having finally found a foe worthy of its scale. The phantoms she had chased for centuries had been replaced by a monster of flesh and steel, and her entire world view had been shattered and reforged by the terror of it. "The threat we face," she began, her voice a dry rasp, "is extra-doctrinal. It operates outside the known parameters of Xenos hostility. Its technology is a perversion of natural law. Its strategy is one of annihilation, not conquest. Therefore, our response must also be extra-doctrinal." She looked from the terrified face of the Lord Commander to the grim, impassive mask of Koorland. For millennia, the Inquisition has maintained a series of last resort protocols sealed under the unthinkable warrant. Contingencies for threats that could threaten the Imperium on an existential level. They are heresies. All of them. To even speak of them is to risk excommunication.
but we are long past such concerns. She activated a hololith. It showed not a military plan, but a string of ancient, fragmented data, myths, legends. There exists a protocol for an event such as this.
The Tanagra Initiative, created during the darkest days of the Scouring, for a time of ultimate need that was never meant to come. The proposal, to seek out and, if possible, restore a strategic asset from the Great Crusade, a final desperate defense. We proposed to awaken a Primarch. The silence in the vault was absolute, broken only by the whirring of the Archmagos of Mars Bionics. The Archmagos, present via hololith, gave voice to the technical aspect of the heresy. My order has long held fragmented data on the unique energy signatures of these beings. The stasis vault on the world you call Nocturne is not technology as we comprehend it. It is a divine paradox, a machine that operates on principles that defy the 16th universal law of the omniscia. To tamper with it is a great risk. The cascade failure could extinguish the life within, or worse, unleash temporal energies we cannot control. But we believe it is possible. The signature, though dormant, remains. Koorland listened, his face a mask of granite. As a son of Rogel Dawn, he was a pragmatist, a builder, a soldier who believed in fortress walls and bolter fire, not myth and legend. This plan was anathema to him. It was the ultimate admission of failure. It was a confession that the Imperium of man in its current form was no longer capable of saving itself. It was a child, crying out for a long-lost father to solve a problem it could not face. He hated it with every fiber of his being. But as he weighed the heresy of this plan against the cold, hard mathematics of the slaughter on Adamantua, he knew there was no other choice. He looked at the faces of the High Lords, seeing not leaders but frightened children, and his decision was made. "Make the preparations," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the future he had just authorized. A single unmarked strike cruiser, the Whisper of Dawn, slipped quietly from the solar system. Aboard was a mission of ghosts, Koorland's own Imperial fists, Huskarls, the yellow armor painted a dull, anonymous grey, a cadre of silent, brooding Iron Hands Tech Marines, the red robes marking them as priests of the machine god on a terrifying pilgrimage, marking an Inquisitor Veritas herself, her face hidden behind a veil, her silent acolytes moving in her shadow. Their destination was a world of eternal fire and deep tradition, the Promethean sanctuary of Nocturne. As they entered orbit, they saw not a garden world, but a living hell. A globe of volcanic fury, its surface a shifting mass of black rock and glowing rivers of lava, all beneath a sky permanently choked with ash. They were met not by the Salamander's chapter, but by a trio of ancient dreadnoughts, the Unburned, the secret guardians of the sacred mountain. Their voices, broadcast over the Vox, were the crackle of a dying fire. "You seek the sleeping father," one of them crackled. "Many have sought him, Father. None have been worthy. State your purpose, so that we may judge your worthiness to fail." Koorland simply transmitted his unredacted report from Adamantua. There was a long silence. Then the dreadnoughts granted them passage. They journeyed to the caldera of Mount Deathfire, a place of legend where the air itself was hot enough to cook flesh. Deep within the earth, they found it. Not a tomb, but a vault. A vast stasis chamber of interlocking, non-Euclidean geometry, forged from a shimmering black metal that seemed to drink the light. For 7 days and 7 nights, the Iron Fathers labored, the mechadendrites interfacing with consoles that writhed with unknowable purpose. They chanted Binharic litanies while the Inquisitor whispered rites of binding, her words a desperate plea to whatever powers still held sway in this sacred, terrifying place. The process was fraught with peril. At one point, a temporal surge aged one of the acolytes to dust in an instant. With a final, shuddering groan that echoed like the death of an old god, the machinery fell silent. The temporal field, a shimmering curtain of blue energy, collapsed. The sarcophagus hissed, venting an atmosphere that had been sealed for 10,000 years. And from the darkness within, a figure arose. He was a giant among giants, a being of myth made manifest, his skin the color of polished obsidian, and his eyes burning with the soft, steady embers of a forge heart. The power that radiated from him was not the wrathful fire of a war god, but the immense, contained heat of a star, tempered by an equally immense sorrow. This was Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, Lord of the Drakes, and his awakening was not a triumph. It was a tragedy. He didn't speak. He simply looked, and in his gaze he saw the decay of 10 millennia. He looked at the grim-faced Sons of Dawn, and saw the endless grinding despair of a 10,000-year war written on their faces. He looked at the half-machine priests of Mars, and saw the cold, compromised logic of a faith that had forgotten its own soul. He looked at the veiled Inquisitor, and saw the fear and desperate, corrupt dogma of the institution that had supplanted his father's dream of an imperial truth. He felt the psychic scream of the galaxy, the shadow of the beast, an entity so foul it was an insult to the very act of creation. When he finally spoke, his first words in 10 millennia were not a roar of defiance, nor a promise of salvation. They were a question, spoken with the quiet, weary grief of a master craftsman discovering his life's work shattered into ruins. It was a question directed not just at the delegation before him, but at the whole of the pathetic, dying age into which he had been so rudely awoken. "What?" he asked, his voice the grinding of mountains. "Have you done?"
Chapter 6. A New Doctrine of War Narrator. The question hung in the superheated air of the stasis vault, a weight heavier than the mountain above them. What have you done? It was not a question of curiosity. It was a judgment, delivered by a being who had last seen the galaxy gleaming with the promise of his father's imperial truth. In his burning gaze, the delegation from Terra saw themselves reflected in the terrifying new light. Inquisitor Veritas, a woman whose entire life was the manipulation of words and the weaving of shadows, found that she had none. She attempted to answer, to speak of Xenos-level threats and extra-doctrinal exigencies, but the bureaucratic jargon withered into meaningless sounds in the face of the being before her.
Vulcan's gaze dismissed her. It was to Koorland he looked, a warrior seeking truth from another warrior. Koorland responded as a son of Dawn would, with unvarnished, brutal fact. He didn't speak. He simply stepped forward and presented a data slate, its flickering screen containing the unredacted truth of the new Imperium. On it, Vulcan saw it all. The casualty reports from Ardamantua, a litany of fallen heroes and shattered war machines, the final garbled pict capture from the Vigilance. showing the impossible reality of the attack moon, and the casualty estimates for the dozens of worlds that had already fallen. He absorbed 10,000 years of decay, arrogance and failure in moments, and the chamber grew hotter. The ancient metal of the vault groaned as if under immense pressure. The Primarch's sorrow was now being tempered by a fire that had not burned for 10 millennia, the cold, focused rage of a master craftsman who finds his life's work defiled, his workshop overrun by vermin. You have allowed the rot to set in so deeply that the foundations are dust, Vulcan said, his voice no longer just sad, but now carrying the low, dangerous rumble of an awakening volcano. You have traded strength for dogma, and vigilance for ritual. You did not fight the fire when it was a spark, and now you come to me, asking me to hold back the inferno. He looked at the Inquisitor, his eyes burning with contempt. Your predecessors hunted monsters in the dark. Contempt. You hunt shadows of your own making while the real monsters feast upon my father's legacy. He handed the slate back to Koorland. The rot is deepest on Terra. It is there I must go, not because you have asked, but because the heart of my father's house must be cleansed. The arrival of the Whisper of Dawn in the Sol system was a moment of supreme political theater. The High Lords, desperate to control the narrative, had arranged a grand welcoming ceremony at the Lion's Gate spaceport. An honor guard of 1,000 custodians stood in gleaming auramite. Lord Commander Udo had a flowery speech prepared, welcoming the prodigal son of the Emperor. The Ecclesiarch had assembled a choir of 1,000,000 souls to sing hymns of praise. They meant to absorb Vulcan into their pageantry, to make him a symbol they could control, a relic to be venerated, not a power to be obeyed. They failed. When the ramp of the strike cruiser lowered, Vulcan emerged alone. The sheer scale of him stunned the assembled dignitaries into silence. He was a being of myth, walking into the mundane light of the present. He strode down the ramp, his gaze sweeping over the honor guard, the politicians, and the priests with an expression of profound, weary contempt. He ignored the outstretched hands, the prepared speeches, the swelling music. He walked past the gilded podium and the trembling Lord Commander as if they were nothing more than inconvenient decorations. As the music faltered, the choir fell silent. In a single, silent act of dismissal, Vulcan shattered the aura of authority the High Lords had cultivated for centuries. His eyes found Koorland, who stood apart with the masters of the last wall. Vulcan walked directly to him, the two armored giants meeting in the center of the vast landing field, creating a visible divide between the true warriors and the useless courtiers. The War Council will be held in your strategium, Lord Koorland, Vulcan stated. I will not suffer the gilded prattle of that chamber again. It was a command that cemented a new order of power in the Imperium. In the Spartan, functional strategium of the last wall, a place of bare metal and tactical displays, Vulcan forged his new war. He absorbed every piece of data, his Primarch's mind processing information with a speed and clarity no mortal could match. He deconstructed the Adamantor campaign on the Hololith, showing where the Astartes' courage had been tragically wasted by flawed attritional doctrine. He praised their bravery while damning the strategy, a painful but necessary lesson for the assembled chapter masters. You fought as lions, he began, his gaze resting on Koorland. You bled for every inch of ground, and in doing so, You handed the enemy a strategic victory. You traded your most precious and finite resource, your Astartes, for his most plentiful and worthless one, his orcs. A war of attrition is a war we have already lost. The old way of war is dead. He swept his hand across the hololithic map, extinguishing the icons of fleets and armies. We will no longer be the shield waiting for the axe to fall. We will be the spear. He looked at the assembled chapter masters, his burning eyes igniting a spark of feral hope in their warrior hearts. I am instituting a new doctrine, the doctrine of the spear. We will no longer engage the enemy's armies. We will hunt its head. We will become assassins on a galactic scale. I want every astropath, every listening post, every scout dedicated to a single task, finding the beast himself. We will take the war to him, not his numberless spawn. He then turned to the Archmagos of Mars. And you have slumbered on a bed of forgotten miracles, fearing knowledge. I am a smith. I fear only the failure to create. You will open the forbidden vaults. The technologies of the Dark Age, the weapons my father deemed too terrible for the Great Crusade, you will unshelve them all. We will fight the enemy's fire not with faith, but with a greater, more terrible fire of our own. I will forge the weapons this new war requires, and you will give me the materials, regardless of the protests of your dogmatic brethren. It was in this moment of terrifying revolutionary change that the Martian Archmagos, his Binharic vocoder trembling, emergency overrode the display. Lord Primarch, a new analysis, a horrifying one, a final one. The strategic map vanished, replaced by a stark, three-dimensional plot of the galaxy. We have been analyzing the teleportation vectors of the attack moons. We assumed the incursions were a spreading, random pattern. We were wrong. They are not random. They are convergent. On the display, a web of sickly green lines appeared. Each represented the calculated path of an attack moon. The Archmagos initiated the final projection. The lines began to move, the future vectors tracing a terrible, undeniable path across the void. The room was utterly silent, save for the hum of the hololith. Koorland watched, his blood running cold as he saw the lines coalesce, arrowing towards a single, final, inevitable point of intersection. The display zoomed in, past the swirling storms of Jupiter, past the red deserts of Mars, until a single, fragile, blue-green jewel hung in the void, now caught in the crosshairs of a dozen incoming apocalypses. The war for the galaxy had been a feint. The billion lives lost, the worlds burned, the fleets shattered. They were all a grand, bloody distraction from the true objective. Vulcan's face was a mask of cold, terrible understanding. "So," he said, his voice now devoid of rage, filled only with a dreadful resolve, "the beast does not seek to conquer our home. He seeks to devour our soul." The narrator's voice returned, now imbued with the cold, dreadful finality of a historian recording the last moments of an epoch. The greatest siege in 10 millennia was about to begin. The beast was not a conqueror, seeking to rule the Imperium. He was an exterminator, coming to sunder its soul, to decapitate the entire human race in a single, audacious stroke. The target was, and always had been, Holy Terra.